got an entity that knows the scriptures extremely well. You've got an entity that's experienced in the vicinity of these mounds. You've got instances of it actually manipulating matter, shapeshift. The large bird that these guys shot at, this dogman werewolf thing, whatever it was that they saw. The fact that you've got the typical sort of like poltergeist activity associated with it. All of these to me point to a demon. You're talking about either one of the pre-flood or the early post-flood giants.
So after I release the first episode of this series, I get an unexpected message through Facebook from a gentleman who claimed that they knew one of the expert witnesses that testified against Jason and Damien. 30 years later, and this story is still unfolding.
A lot of times, especially in these cases, the devil is in the details, and there's a supernatural force, a dark demonic force that is causing confusion and bringing what we would call invisibility, not physical invisibility, but cloaking the truth.
As a child, I knew what my passion was, I knew what my drive was, I knew what my desire was. I loved magic, and I would say to myself, these names that people think of, I would say, one day my name is going to eclipse all of them. I'm going to be the greatest magician there's ever been.
Every magic trick consists of 3 parts, or acts. The first part is called the pledge. The magician shows you something ordinary, a deck of cards, a bird, or a man.
The first verdict reads as follows. We, the jury, find Damien Eccles guilty of capital murder in the death of Stevie Branch. We, the jury, find Damien Eccles guilty of capital murder in the death of Chris Byers.
You heard what was said about him. Do you think he could have done it?
They made it seem like he did.
Would you have a hard time letting him go? Based on what you heard?
Yeah.
My brain is about to explode. In my opinion, Jesse Misskelley is the key to all of this. After all, it was his original confession that got Damien and Jason arrested. But was it all a lie? So right after Jesse Misskelley was found guilty, he was escorted back to the prison by a few officers. And allegedly the whole car ride back to the prison, Jesse is singing like a canary.
What we want to talk to you about is all the stuff in the paper about a deal with Jesse. Right now we don't know what his situation is, although we think that he is more inclined to testify right now than he has been at any point up to now. The Friday that Jesse was convicted, they questioned him, the officers who took him down inquired of him what had really happened, and apparently Jesse, contrary to somebody that was innocent that would say things like, gee, I've just been convicted and I didn't do it, and what a terrible injustice. Jesse talked all the way down there about how he committed the crime and the specific details. Unfortunately, we need his testimony real bad.
The prosecution was willing to cut a deal with Jesse and maybe even remove the life sentence if he would show up at Jason and Damien's trial and testify against them in the courtroom. The prosecution really felt like Jesse was going to play ball because the judge issued him a new attorney and he was beginning to broker this deal if that Jesse would give his confession in the courtroom, what would he get in return? So my concern with Jesse's third confession, known as the Bible confession, was he just putting that together and lying so he could get a better deal because they were promising him that he wouldn't have to serve a life sentence and someday he would walk free. Ultimately, Jesse does not give the confession in the courtroom, but there's some very intriguing details of this other confession.
Now, I want to mention back to the day the three little boys were murdered. If you would, on that day, if you go to Robin Hood Woods, who did you go there with? Okay. And when you went there, what happened when you got to the woods? We took that for a while and three little boys came up. Did you have anything to drink, or had you done any drugs, anything like that prior to that time, or during that time? Okay, what were you drinking? Whiskey and whiskey. Okay. Now, after you got in the woods, do you have any idea how long you were in the woods before the kids came up? Not very long. But when did you first know they were in the woods? All I know is I was the kids home. Okay. And what happened at that point? When they started making some noises, when you say you get their attention, what did you do? Holler a little bit. Okay. And when they came over, what happened? Then Damien jumped on them. The mother picked up on Damien. And then they jumped on him. Do you know which one Damien jumped on?
Again, here I am completely baffled by this case. You got 3 dead kids found in a drainage ditch. No conclusive evidence at the scene. You have a taped confession. The narrative suggests that this was a satanic ritual killing, which is very highly debatable because there's no good evidence, only hearsay. Then you got a documentary crew that comes in and shapes an opposing narrative that this is all satanic panic and these boys are completely innocent and they're actually victims. But then you have Damien, who has a documented violent past, and he has a very, very loyal friend in Jason Baldwin. This confession has all the details that the first one was missing. The confession tape is about 30 minutes long and tells of the alleged events that led up to the killings and including the actual killings. There is one important detail that's missing in Jesse's confession. Nowhere in that confession does it even slightly point to the fact that this was a satanic ritual. In Jason and Damien's trial, the prosecution called to the witness stand an expert in occult crimes, Dale Griffiths. At the time, Dale Griffiths was the leading expert in occult crimes.
In looking at young people involved in the occult, do you see any particular type of dress?
I have personally observed people wearing black fingernails, having their hair painted black, wearing black t-shirts. Sometimes they will tattoo themselves.
The gentleman that reached out to me through Facebook and said that he knew one of the experts on the stand trained with Dale Griffiths, and he had some very interesting inside information.
My name is Tom Dunn. I kind of accidentally started working within this realm of ministry, dealing with people that come out of a background of satanic ritual abuse. I worked for about 10 years with Pastor Russ Dizdar, who, in my opinion, was the leading man in the world when it came to this work. Man, he was gracious enough to take me around the world. We went to Germany, we went to Poland, we went to Scotland, places all over the United States, investigating satanic crime.
Imagine my surprise when Tom Dunn, who trained with Russ Dizdar for years, contacts me and says that he knew Dale Griffiths. And not only that, but was in the same room with him, and Dale trained him.
Dale Griffiths reached out to us and began sharing with us cases, and he was retiring and he needed somebody else to kind of take over, the phone calls that he was getting. And we would get a phone call from Dale and he would say, hey, can you take this case? Can you do this? Russ acquired all of Dale's case files. Russ bought those cases off of him, and along with that, Dale agreed to teach us. We would meet up there in a hotel restaurant, and we would spend about 2 hours every couple months, and we probably did this about 5 times, and Dale would teach us how to do investigation.
There's a provocative theory out there that suggests that the police were attempting to make this thing look like a satanic crime, even though there was no evidence of that. Or was there?
Do you have an opinion as to whether or not there are occult overtones or evidence of occult involvement in these particular murders?
Well, the date being close to Beltane,
What
a
is that?
holiday, May 1st. Also, the day before that is Walpurgisnacht. Then you go into the fact that some groups, occult cult groups, or will use a full moon. In several occult books, they will talk about the life force of the blood. Usually the younger the individual, the more pure it is, the more power or the force it has. A lot of times they will take blood and store it for other services and other use.
Dale 100% believed that these guys, that the West Memphis Three, Miss Kelly, Baldwin, and Eccles, were involved in the murder of the children. Now, I didn't agree with Dale on everything. Just like anybody, they have a disagreement on cases or whatever, or they have a different perspective on it.
So in my mind, the fact that Beltane had passed 4 days prior and that there was a full moon on May 5th, 1993, that is not enough evidence for me to deduce that there was a satanic ritual taking place. So why was Dale Griffiths so sure that these guys did it?
And according to Dale, he said that he had heard that there were people in that area reaching out to him, law enforcement, asking his advice on stuff prior to the crimes, okay?
Is that why he was so sure? Or is it possible that the police were trying to coerce him into sticking with the narrative that they already formed?
So one time we were talking about the case, and Dale, I'll never forget this, he told us that the police in West Memphis wanted him, they asked him, would you be willing to testify that these cuts are occultic in nature? And Dale looked at the crime scene photos and he said, I'm not willing to do that. He said, I don't think these are occult, that the cuts on here are occultic in nature. And when he told us that, even though Dale believes they're guilty, for me, it was another confirmation at what I had been feeling, that there was a strong motivation with the police. They're like, okay, we're going too fast in this direction. We don't want to change directions on our investigation. We're going to get these guys.
Well, the prosecution had the #1 expert at the time testify on the stand that he thought this was a ritual. The defense had to discredit him.
What classes did you take between 1980 and 1982 to obtain your master's degree?
I told you, I answered that before, none.
And do you want to tell this jury that these crimes were motivated by occult beliefs?
Yes.
In the documentary films, they really did a good job making Dale Griffiths look like a hack expert. But in reality, Dale Griffiths was the #1 go-to in occult crimes at that time. He was very knowledgeable.
A lot of people would maybe be surprised, okay, at my take on the West Memphis 3 case. My personal take is I am not convinced that there was a satanic ritual that took place, and I'm not convinced that Eccles, Baldwin, and Miss Kelly were the perpetrators. Now, I could be totally wrong. That's just my personal opinion.
So looking at everything in the aggregate, it really feels like the police got this wrong, but they were not willing to recant the satanic ritual narrative. So at this point, there's one thing in the back of my mind that's still really confusing. Why wasn't there any blood evidence at the scene? If all 3 boys bled at some point, there's 0 blood.
I mean, the only thing that the prosecution has put on against Jesse is this wild story that he told the police. And I hope that the fact that there's no physical evidence linking him to the crime scene is going to have a lot of impact on the jury. And when we're talking about reasonable doubt.
But I think you need to deal with the lack of physical evidence, not to just let them get away with the fact that they were in the water and it all washed away. A crime scene that clean has to be purposefully planned, done that way. Okay, that the fact that it looked washed down was not just happenstance.
Right.
Okay,
that is probably something like you said we can maybe
somebody intentionally, purposefully, with great cunning and intelligence, tried to get rid of every spot of blood, semen, mud, footprint, anything that may have been there. They purposely tried to get rid of all that.
An 18 and a 17 and a 16-year-old kid don't pull this off. You know, I think there's a lot of professional killers who don't leave it this clean, you know.
I really do believe that if the jury hears what lust serial killers are like and what they do and how they leave crime scenes, the missing evidence, the souvenirs, I have no doubt that there's a serial killer running around that did these murders. I don't have any doubt about it. Hell, he may be in Idaho now, but I don't have any doubt about it, you know. You know, it is somebody who knew what they were doing, had done it before, and probably has done it since then, or will definitely do it again.
The defense team makes a great point here. Even professional killers don't leave a crime scene as clean as this one. There are so many things that just don't add up, and now when you add Dale Griffiths into the mix, here you have the #1 guy, the go-to guy when it comes to occult/satanic crimes. He believes that this was a satanic or occult motivated murder. So I'm thinking to myself, there has to be more to why Dale Griffiths came up with this. So I did some digging. When police contact Dale Griffiths to obtain his professional opinion on an alleged occult crime, he has a questionnaire that police need to fill out. So in this questionnaire that police filled out, there is an entirely different narrative that never shows up in the movies. Dale Griffiths writes the West Memphis Police Department this: upon the materials in the investigation report, some questions come to mind. The questions are of such nature to aid in the formulation of an opinion. The first question is this: prior to the deaths, were there activity known in the areas where the bodies were found? And if so, what was it? He's got about 11 questions here, but the last question that he asks is, was all the blood accounted for? So the police responded to the first question as follows. Prior to the deaths, there were reports of satanic worship in the area that included several children having seen persons wearing black and chasing them from the area. Signs have been described as being a pentagram drawn on the ground near where the bodies were. A piece of board was seen on one occasion that had a painted circle and star on the face of it. This board was seen by an adult who was told of it by a child who had been in the area, and the adult reported that he did see the board. On another occasion, a doll has been seen to be hanging from a rope that was suspended from a tree in the area. One of the most recent reports made was that of a friend of the victims who states that he was supposed to have been with the victims on the day of the homicides. He reported a few days before the homicides that he and 2 of the victims had visited the area, and that while they were there, they had seen 5 men who were dressed in black and painted black on their skin areas. He reported to his mother that he had heard the 5 men to be speaking in Spanish and standing in a circle. When asked how he knew that they were speaking Spanish, he stated that he could not understand them and that he thought it must be Spanish. He reported that the 5 men had been seen by him and 2 of the victims on several occasions prior to the homicides. He talked of occasions when the men would be mean to a dog, and when asked how they were being mean, he responded that they were pushing it around between them. The boy also explained that he had seen each man with a knife that was kept in some type of sheath that was worn on the belt. And then police respond to Dale's question about the blood being accounted for, and they respond like this. The victim that was cut in the area of his penis was known to have died by bleeding to death. However, at the crime scene, no blood was found at all. It was felt that the bleeding could have taken place in the water, or if the bleeding was done on the bank, it was cleaned with the aid of the water in the ditch. It may be of note to report to you that it was after I testified in court about the fact that no blood could be found in the area that the friend reported that a bucket was used to catch the blood. So you can see how Dale could come to this conclusion that there was all of this satanic activity allegedly happening right at the same spot, and now Damien is at that spot, and then these kids die, and Jesse Misskelley confesses. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that this could be an occult-related crime, but really it doesn't look like a satanic service or ritual happened. So shortly after Damien was arrested, a local newspaper writes an article quoting a couple of Damien's old classmates at school before he dropped out. None of them were surprised that he got arrested for doing this, for killing somebody. So apparently he would walk around school with a skull of a cat, and it was well known around school that Damien would tell people that he worshiped the devil. The idea that Damien was singled out and wrongly accused of this crime for the sole reason that he wore black and listened to Metallica is completely ridiculous when you look at the evidence and not just the movie. And time again, Damien is caught in his own lies. In fact, Damien's not even his name.
Why did you change your name?
I was very involved in the Catholic Church, and we were going over different names of the saints. St. Michael's was where I went to church at. And we heard about this guy from the Hawaiian Islands, Father Damien, that took care of lepers until he finally caught the disease himself and died.
Was that the reason you chose Damien as your first name?
Yes, it did.
Okay. Did the choosing of the name Damien have anything to do with any type of horror movies, Satanism, cultism, any of that nature?
Nothing whatsoever.
So are we to believe that Damien, or Michael, changed his name because he was inspired by a Catholic priest? It's completely incoherent with who he is.
People probably think that I'm in Satanism because usually what people don't understand, they try to destroy or ridicule it. Try to make it look bad or wrong. West Memphis is pretty much like second Salem right now. Because everything that happens there, every crime, no matter what it is, it's blamed on Satanism.
He was going to school. He wanted to go to school to be a priest. He was faithful in the church. and he looked into a little bit of Wicca, but he never went to it. And I think if people looked into what Wicca is, they would understand it a little better. The only thing Wiccans do is worship the earth.
So it seems like Damien's sister's reading off the same script that maybe the directors came up with. She says that Damien was never a Wiccan, that he never went to it, but only looked at it. But reality tells a completely different story. In August of 1993, a correction officer found a suicide note that Damien wrote. "Dear Mom and Dad, just remember I am a Wiccan and I will be reincarnated. I promise, I love you very much." The entire lie that the defense attorneys and Damien made up, and I suspect even the directors of the movie made up, are very, very easy to poke holes into. Nobody ever believed that Damien Eccles wanted to become a Catholic priest. There are so many small details and small things that Damien lies about that he doesn't need to lie about. It's almost like he's a compulsive liar. Damien is a self-proclaimed Wiccan and magician, and there's no doubt that he studied Aleister Crowley's magic. According to the famous occultist Aleister Crowley, magic is the science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with will. In fact, Crowley says that every intentional act is a magical act. So I want to put it out there on the table. Is it possible that Damien was practicing some sort of dark magic and he was thinking that everybody was going to believe these obvious lies? Because they sure did. So it's very well documented that Aleister Crowley played a big part in the Wiccan religion.
When Wicca first started out, it was actually created by piecing different parts of ancient Druidic culture and texts that were found by a man named Gardner and his people, and the texts were incomplete. So in order to fill them in, he brought in his good friend at the OTO, Aleister Crowley, and incorporated Crowleyan Satanism to complete the rituals. And then he started pulling everything together and produced the first book known as Wicca, right? So that was actually its origins. You cannot separate Wicca from Satanism just based on the origins. You simply cannot. Of course, anyone who's Christian understands a cult is a cult is a cult is a cult. You know, dark arts are dark arts, regardless of what label you want to place on them. So over the generations now, we've seen it merge and develop and incorporate, you know, new doctrines, new theologies, and things like that. It's gone away from its core roots of Druidism-based Wicca into New Age occultism, because you have Wiccans that pretty much pick and choose the gods and goddesses they worship and stuff like that. Some that adhere to the Druid ones, they'll worship Brunos and Diana. Others will bring in Hindu gods. Others will bring in, you know, Japanese, you know, things found in Buddhism and stuff like that. Or you even have branches that would be, they label themselves Wiccan, but would that technically be Norse? You know, they bring in Odin, Loki, you know, Thor, and things of that nature. So depending upon which sect it was he was studying or claiming to be, there would have been passages for reincarnation. There would have been beliefs introduced as far as you don't go to heaven or hell, you just kind of roam the world. You know, so it kind of depends on what he was reading exactly as to what it was he was actually believing at the time.
I want to remind you this is a fundraiser, so I want you to give from your heart because these young men are kind of counting on us. And just for the record, anyone, if you know someone that hasn't been able to make it here today or for whatever reason left early, if you'll remind them, this cauldron's going to be available for the next couple weeks to continue to add to. So
I'm putting money in here because I want Damien to be able to go to college outside of prison.
Hey,
I want him to go to a real school.
Really soon. And remember, too, that he had the courage to say he was Wiccan in adversity when he knew that it would cost him a lot.
All of us who are here because we enjoy knowing that there is religious freedom, hopefully somewhere, that we all respect each other for our beliefs, for our loves, for everything that we have.
They wrote it off as something, well, we don't understand that. It's got to be the work of the devil. Well, you know, Wiccans don't believe in the devil, okay? The devil is a Christian deity. They use the devil, or they believe that the devil is something that causes them to do evil things. And in the Wiccan Rite and the Wiccan tradition, those folks believe that you are 100% responsible for your actions. And they believe in the law of three. Whatever you do comes back on you threefold. If you put out good energy, that's coming back to you threefold. If you put out negative energy and dark energy, that's coming back on you threefold. That is what the Wiccan means.
I know that as a Wiccan, that every religion is important to me, and if I felt like even Christians, that they weren't having their right to be, they couldn't practice in their way, I would defend that. It's not about just me being Wiccan. This is about how did this affect 3 little boys whose murderers I personally believe went unfounded, and there's 3 young men who are in jail, and one of them's there, and he's on death row just because he said, I'm Wiccan.
You know, every single, it seemed like anyway, every single department in the United States was developing a cult crime unit or a, satanic ritual crime type unit that would learn the symbolism, would understand the motivations of the crimes, and be able to investigate. And so books by law enforcement agents were beginning to be written and used throughout the 90s. And so we definitely had a flurry of direct criminal activity. It hasn't gone away. It's just, again, they think that it's going to incite panic to the community. So they're told strictly, from higher-ups and trainers, not to discuss it, publicize it, talk to the news people, about it, that kind of stuff.
Well, if one does a search, and starts trying to look up satanic ritual abuse, one is almost instantly confronted with the idea that it simply doesn't exist, that it's a mass hallucination effect, and the kids were, these memories are being planted. A lot of that was propagated by a foundation called the False Memory Syndrome Foundation. Can you see if you agree on that, and then maybe talk a little bit about that organization?
Sure, I agree with you on that there's been those who have said that, because I've had to deal with that all along, even when I taught in the academy, officers would ask, because for them, they want the body, they want the bones. Even we would take victims to law enforcement. I remember this one chief here locally would always say, Russ, bring us the body, bring us the bones. Well, we brought bones back from Pennsylvania once, and we've seen the crime, slides, hundreds of them. So it's not that the crime's not being committed. It's, again, on a deeper level of satanic ritual abuse when children or others. Now, for me, I've spent over 20 years working with victims. We developed a team to go after the perpetrators and to find out everything we could about them. So we see the links, we see the folks, so there's no question on our part. No question on the part of hundreds of thousands of victims that have been through psych wards, in counseling centers, and so forth. I think it'd be more hilarious to believe that all these different people had the exact same hallucination.
Right. So, and what is that number like? I mean, what kind of diagnosed? What do we have to hold on to as far as how many people have gone to a psychiatrist and been diagnosed?
Sure.
That kind of thing.
Right. Back in 92, we did a seminar. We were doing seminars at the time then, and I quoted from Holly Hector, who was a hypnotherapist from Centennial Hospital in Denver. They, along with Hartford Hospital in Chicago and others, developed a ritual abuse ward. There were so many cases of multiple personality disorder that was connected to satanic ritual abuse that a number of hospitals and their psych wards and so forth would set up a ward that would deal just with ritual abuse. Now, her ward back in the early 90s, that's all they took into that section of the hospital. She, in a book called Satan Associates by Wendell Amstead, quoted from the American Psychological Association, I think. I'm not sure where she quoted, but in that book anyway, it's listed at 2.5 million diagnosed cases in 1992-93. That's gone way up now to where we in 94 and 96 in doing seminars, we estimated close to 5 million diagnosed cases, majority of which are satanic ritual abuse. But then, here's the problem, Chris. We have on the other side, half the people we deal with never been to a psych ward, a counselor, they're undiagnosed. So we began to estimate statistically 10 million, And then just 2 years ago, Colin Ross, a Canadian psychiatrist from a big center up there, he's a world-renowned psychiatrist, so forth, in his book, he's now estimated up to 10 million, half of which diagnosed, half of which are undiagnosed out there. That's a lot of individuals.
Damien or Michael Damian Wayne Eccles Hutchinson, whatever he calls himself, he almost had me believing he was innocent. One of the deciding factors in their guilty verdict was that Damien was blowing kisses to the victim's parents.